and welcome to the session on Courier 2.5. With how many of you saw my session at Code Garden about all the fancy stuff you could do? Okay. I think I've been building on Courier for so long. It feels like a year now. It's almost a year, and it's a common mistake that you only want to show off the most advanced stuff and the newest stuff. So what I've been demoing so far in my sessions on Courier is integrating with the build server and putting it into Subversion and doing all fancy stuff with it. But it turns out that doesn't apply to very many, and not very many actually go back home and using it. They kind of agree at the session that it's neat and wow, that looks impressive, but it's not something you go back home and use. So I can't connect to Google Talk. Okay, that's okay. Well, so this session is a bit different. I'm trying to focus more on the everyday tasks that you would do with Courier, how editors and developers would use this every day, mostly through a right-click menu inside of Umbraco. Now I'll talk a little bit about code and how you can use, well, your own custom code to improve Courier so you end up with less headaches and less worries for your editors. So anyways, come on. Why doesn't PowerPoint work?
You only have one slide.
Yeah. Oh, and then I have my introduction slide. Hi, my name is Per. If you didn't know. Anyways, so what will I be talking about? I'll just give a quick introduction to Courier for those who don't know what it is. I'll talk a bit about the jump from version 2 to 2.5 and what we kind of learned from that and what big changes we're doing. There's been some very good feedback on Courier 2, and we see a lot of people using it. We get a lot of feedback on what works and especially what doesn't work, which is always very interesting. It can be delivered in different ways, but it's always interesting how sites are built in Umbraco, because we all know there's multiple ways you can build a site, and therefore there's also multiple ways you can break Courier, or Courier can break your site. So I'll go on to talk a little bit about that. Then I'm going to talk a bit about how editors can work with Courier, how that would be a normal day-to-day workflow with Courier without getting too advanced. Then we'll talk about how developers can use Courier. We'll talk a bit about how you can build your own tooling, how you can use the API to actually build small common stuff that needs like 5 or 6 lines of code, not building big item providers or data providers or anything, just standard helpers for your everyday work. So that's the program, at least. I haven't timed this talk, so if it suddenly stops, then it's because I spent way much time or something. So, anyways, what is Courier? It is a deployment tool for your Umbraco site. That means that you can take any item from Umbraco in your local installation or in your staging environment or development site and just push it over to another instance of Umbraco that has Courier installed as well, and where you have a user that's authenticated to use Courier. That's the very basic idea, that you can take a document or a template or a macro or a XLT file, right-click it, say Courier, deploy, and you're done. That's the basic idea and the problem we wanted to solve. It can move anything, and you can build your own providers for it. So if you needed to move contour forms, then Tim has actually written a quite nice contour provider for Courier as well. So you can just right-click a contour form and move that over. It also handles files and dependencies while you do all these things, so you don't have to worry about if you right-click a document. That will include the document type, it will include the template, it will include the files you use in your rich text editor, images and other things you link to. And the most important thing in this talk, at least, is that it's so accessible to a right-click menu. So this is what Courier does, basically. I don't know if everybody can see this, but this is just deploying a single page. It's to show you a bit of the complexity that Courier is doing for you. All the way out here, we actually have a document, it's property data. That is linked down to a media item, because in that property data is a media picker that links to an image. That property exists on a document. That document has a template. That document has a document type. And that document type has a load of data types to represent the different property types on that document type. And if you go out here, the document type has a template. That template has a list of macros inside of its HTML, and those macros have macro property types, and those macros also have XLT files, user controls, DLLs associated with them. The good thing is that this is what Courier does out of the box. It detects this entire tree for you. And when it then starts deploying this single item, it'll start out here and just work in the tree. Because this also shows the importance of each item, is that for example, a macro doesn't work if it doesn't have the macro property types it needs, and a macro doesn't work if it doesn't have the files like an XLT file, so it doesn't work. So that's why it's important that Courier does this collection of data. So this is just a single item. If you look at an entire site, it gets way more complex. But this is how complex a simple site. This is the creative website site. I think it's 20 pages. But because everything is so intervened and linked between each other, and you have so many different components that consist of so many subcomponents, you end up with a very complex thing to actually deploy. But this is what Courier hides away from you. It encapsulates inside of a right-click menu and just enables a developer to not worry about something as complex as this. This is what it does. When it's done packaging your item, it turns them into Courier files. It saves them on disk. You can then go in and see all your documents as Courier files. But these Courier files is in no way magical files, because they're just basic XML representing your data in a form that is static. That means there's no IDs that depends on an identity. Everything is turned into a GUID, so we can move them to another site and install them again and have a consistent link between items on one site to another. So we always know how different things are moved, and we can later on then do updates because we can find a unique identifier for every single item. So this is the basics of what Courier does. Takes stuff from your site, configures how they are all connected, and then turns it into some data. In a file, you can just copy-paste, FTP, or move in other ways. Any questions so far? Yeah?
Just, if you've got something like a media picker to a media item, but is it going to know that it's only moving one media item, or is it going to try and move three times?
So your question is, if you have a media picker that points to a media item.
Yeah, and that media item is picking 3 documents.
Yeah. Okay, good question. So the question is, if you have 3 media pickers pointing to the same media item, basically, different places in your site, do we have 3 identical items? Or no, we don't, because everything ends up with a unique identifier. So when things are collected, Courier keeps an internal index saying, we already added this to the graph. We'll add a marker to ensure that the media item is installed before anything that depends on it, but it's only in the graph as data one time. So it keeps track of the dependencies, but the data is only there once. Yeah?
What happens, for instance, if your media type references a content node?
What happens if my media type references a content node?
Okay, that's probably a bad example. I had a situation where a member type needed to reference content nodes which were associated to that member, so I assume media type could do that as well.
Well, first of all, Courier doesn't move members at all. It doesn't handle members at all. But if you have something that's depending on an ID, it's either configured out of the box to actually collect these IDs and add them as dependencies and move them over. And if it's not working out of the box, you can most likely configure it in the Courier config file. It has some default configurations that can detect if it's a content picker or a media picker, for example. And then it can assume that the data of that field is node IDs and then convert them into, unique IDs as the GUIDs of the different nodes are. So you can most likely do it just by configuration. Right, so that's the basics of Courier, what it does. Now I'll do a demo. So in here we have a creative website site. And if we open up, this is what it comes with when you install it. It's the wonderful work of Warren. So if I just go back, and I have a site over here called clean.local, and it's empty. So the demo is that I'll right-click home here, select Courier, then hit deploy. So we'll see a status bar here saying what is happening. So it's building up this graph you saw before, and now you see a list of the different items you have in here. This is what it collects when you just right-click home, and it takes all the child nodes of home and takes that over. Then I can hit continue. We'll go back to a task manager again. This is handled as a background thread, so you can close this down if you want to, and it'll continue working. And it should be done about now. There we go. So if we reload over here, we now have home, and we have the entire site over here. And if we open it up, we'll see that it looks almost the same. So you can see the headlines are missing. Some other things are missing as well. That is because Courier is not perfect in detecting every dependency. It's very hard to find a model that fits everybody. So this is one of the edge cases where Courier cannot detect it. It's basically because in one of the JavaScript files for the site is a reference to a Flash file that is located in a folder. So we need to add that manually. Luckily, you only have to do this the first time you actually deploy your site. So if you just try to do that, so I'll just take the Ziffer folder along with it and go to advanced settings. In here I can now add some files and folders to my deployment manually. And I know, because I've been looking intensely at Warren's site, that this Flash file that it references is in the assets folder. I just hit continue. Again, it's packaging stuff up here, and continue. And if we go over here, it now has the logos working. So now we have a site that's identical to the one on our local site. And now your editors can start working with it and just passing over these small incremental changes to a site. And this is the daily workflow of Courier. This is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be as easy as this is. That you don't have to worry about all these graphs and big UIs. You just have to worry about right-clicking and clicking a button then 2 times. So if you're an editor, or if you're a web developer, you probably would like to add some new functionality to your site. For example, adding a media picker, picking some items, and putting that on a news article or something else. And that's where you start running into problems if you add something that Courier doesn't support. So let's try to do that. So, if I open up my packages here and install a new one. So this is DAMP, Digibiz Advanced Media Picker. The guy who did it is having a session in the other room. You still have time to go see it if you want to. And these are one of the things that Courier almost supports out of the box. It has some configuration options that Courier doesn't support out of the box, and we'll look at those in a moment. So what we'll do now is we'll just set up a new data type. After the application pool refreshes and this stops loading.
Thanks.
It always feels much longer than it actually is. It's awful.
It feels awfully long from you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Thanks, Nils. Come on. So while we wait, we can look at the configuration options of this. Hey. Well. You can turn this off in 4.7.1, by the way. And we're back. Okay, so hopefully this got installed as it should. So we'll just add a new data type in here. And save. So one of the things is that we can just store it as an ID, and out of the box Courier 2.5 will just pick it up and recognize that as a media item and link that as a dependency. So let's just go with the simple version for now. So if I just go in and pick settings, document types, text page, and add this data type as a property to this type. Let's open up a page over here. Oh, that's worn. Well, oh yeah. Because you need to configure this to use a media picker. Save. And then you can go back. And now it works. There we go. So, now that it works, we can go down here and we can choose a file, or we can create a new media item. So this is the DigiBiz Advanced Media Picker. It's from Holland, and quite a few people use it. At least judging by the Courier support emails we get. So I think I have some photos in here. Oops. There we go. So what we have now is a item with a media item on it, and if I just right click this and say Courier, it will do some of the things automatically, and I'll just point them out to you in a moment as soon as the dialog opens. Maybe I right-clicked it in the wrong way. Let's do that again. Control F5. Yeah, Control F5. So I'm kind of running out of materials. I've danced, I've told jokes, I've told you can turn this off, so hopefully it won't appear again. Right, so let's try doing this again. And Courier, there we go. Okay, so what it does now is, if you expand this up here, you can see that it includes the damp media type, or sorry, data type. And if we look down here, it includes some media, which is the media item I just included. It detects that. And if we look here in files, it also figured out that the data type uses DigiBiz Advanced Media Picker.dll. So if we hit continue here, we should assume that this will just work because it looks like it detected everything. But we're wrong. We're wrong, and in a moment we'll see the other side stop working. And there's a few reasons for this. And luckily there's also a solution for it. So if I go in here and open it up, it gives me a yellow screen of death, saying that it can't find this specific file here. And when I looked in the folder of this specific folder, I could see, this specific data type uses a lot of resources in this folder, but there's no way of detecting it because it's encapsulated into a DLL, and we can't really look at what's going on inside of that. So what we need to do is to write a custom resolver for this specific data type. We need to tell it what this data type expects to be in there. And there's no easy way of detecting things like this, and this is a part of the issues some are having with Courier, is that Courier can't figure everything out. As some was really disappointed on Twitter that I said it doesn't do magic, and I think that was a big disappointment. But it does do these resolvers where you can configure everything for it. So let's try to open up a class here that does this resolving for us. As I'm horrible at writing code during a presentation, as I'm spending most of my time looking at this ring of death rotating, then I've pre-written it. So in here I do a couple of things. This is what is called a property data resolver provider. And it's an abstract class where you can do two things. You can hook into the packaging and extraction or deployment of the data type associated with a property, and you can hook into the packaging and the extraction of the property data itself. So you can hook into two areas, which is very common when we're talking about resolving a data type. So in this area here, I have this code here. Can everybody see this, or should I increase the font size? We'll just increase the font size. Come on. Yeah, I just tried that. It wasn't so responsive.
Else there's a zoom option in the lower left corner.
You know everything about Visual Studio, Nils. Okay, so well, anyways, what it does in here, first of all, it needs a data type ID. This is the ID of the DAMP control, and this is embedded inside of the DLL, so this doesn't change. So we can identify a specific property and its data type based on this single ID. What we're then doing in down here is that we're hooking into the packaging of the data type, specifying that, well, we better add, well, this bin digibus tree.dll, which it needs, and we're also adding the folder Umbraco plugins digibus advanced media picker folder here. So we're basically just telling add this as a dependency, an entire folder, then Courier will figure it out, and add this specific DLL as a resource. So that's one thing we need. The other thing is that we don't really need anything else to make this work, I guess. So let's just take this file and copy it into our site. Here, and we also need it here. You need it at both ends, because when you're packaging something, you don't know where it's going yet. Or at least you can assume that you don't know where it's going. So both sides need to know how to resolve such a thing. So if we go back again and wait for the site to restart, might as well tell this one to restart as well. Right, so we'll just right click it again. Courier.
Time for a song.
Oh fuck. Any requests for music?
Ole Erling.
I don't have Ole Erling on my iPhone, sorry. You have? Oh, okay, come on. Can you just trust me if I say this is working, so I don't have to wait for this shitty piece of crap to work?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. While we wait, yeah, sure. Is it a long one? Then it's okay.
To make this work, you copied a code file into the app code.
Yeah.
Is that the only way of distributing that? Because I was thinking, this should be the work of the package developer.
Yeah.
And how would he go about distributing this?
He could distribute it with his project as well.
Okay.
It needs a reference to the class, of course, but that's basically it. So I believe he can just embed it into his project. And that should be all he needs to do.
So his project should come with a DLL that contains the code for...
Yeah. He could, or we could have a repository of having these resolvers in one location. We could do that as well. Or we could put them on our or Codeplex or something like that. Yeah.
Have you considered putting that into an XML file?
So everything is done with the XML file?
Yeah, because it would be great if I could just list out all of my dependencies / whatever.
Yeah.
And everything to just work.
Yeah.
Would that be something that you would consider?
Well, I haven't considered it so far exactly to avoid the sheer amount of configuration files and to have a configuration hell for every individual item. It has been so much easier to do it as a code-first approach and hooking into the event model instead. But it's a good idea, and it's probably more approachable to have a generic configuration for the data types than having a code people have to use. So it's not a bad idea, but I haven't thought of it.
You could actually make a provider and just have a really rich...
Yeah, you could. You could have a resolver that just looks for a configuration file, that's true. Well, it's back. So let's try to do this again. Or maybe it's not. Apparently this is the demo from hell.
Måske jeg noget at gøre med, at dit net ryger hele tiden. Kan du bare stikke Ethernet?
Jeg har ikke min Ethernet dongle med, tak.
The rest of the session will be in Danish.
In Danish about network configuration. Sorry, we're changing it a bit.
But then you can hear about packages.
So what Niels was saying in Danish, sorry, is that it might be because my network is crapping out for some odd reason. But let's try to just disable stuff, which you don't want to do either. This is a Samsung machine. Don't ever buy it. Come on. Okay, we'll talk about something else while this figures out what you want to do. So, it has been a very long development cycle ongoing from 2 to 2.5, which I'm trying to illustrate with this session and a long timeout. It's based on really common complaints. There's been 3 really major things in version 2.0 in Courier. One of them is timeouts. If you try to package something that's too big to actually move over a web service connection and the connection times out, or a thread is aborted, then it doesn't work, of course. So that's one of the major things. And as you saw in the demo before, we've added the task manager, and we've added the functionality of running everything as a background thread, as a background task. And Courier keeps track of every task that's running and queues everything up automatically. So you can start multiple things. When one task is done, it just continues with the next. So you can queue things up in the task manager as well. So that's the one big thing. The other one is regards to UI issues. It's been pretty hard to actually figure out what's going on when you hit right-click something and just tell it to deploy, and you get 75 items back, and you can't really see what it is or what files it is, and you can't turn things on and off. So we've done a lot of things about that, and I wanted to show you permissions. Hopefully I can do in a moment. So you can actually turn off different parts of the Courier providers. So if your editors are not even interested or should be allowed to transfer document types, data types, templates, then Courier can now safely ignore these items. It will do a check against your target machine to see if it's possible to still transfer content and media, even though these items are not there. But they don't have to collect all the changes based on document types and templates, so it will be much more efficient for editors especially. The last thing is compatibility. That's why we've added these new tools to, for example, add support for DDB's advanced media picker. And we have also added support for all the U components, UI controls that add node IDs. So you can now use U components. Yeah, Neil?
Anything in the relations database?
Anything in the relations database? It does list the different relations right now on the documents, so it includes relations, but you need to tell it which type of relations you need to include in it, because if you just tell it to use everything, you end up with a ton of data, and a lot of it is not needed. So you need to specify which kind of relations you need to move over.
By that, do you mean groups, relationship groups?
Yeah, when you add a relation, you give it an alias.
Yeah.
Included in Umbraco is relate on copy is one of the standard relations. But if you add your own custom ones, you need to add them to a list of relations you need to copy over. Relations work out of the box with documents and media. So that's the only limitations right now. But it is added. So, and then there's a bit of lack of openness and transparency. It's been taking too long to get from 2 to 2.5, but it was a decision that was made saying that if we need to solve these 3 major things, then we also need to make a major change in some of the APIs and the background code, which we of course should have been more open about in the beginning, which we weren't. So we'll try to learn from that and do better. So the 3 main things is that packaging, extraction, and transfers have been refactored, so it now works in long-running threads. We've moved a lot of responsibilities from the core out into the providers. That means we can now do things completely separated. You can have a client running on one machine, asking a site on a different machine to deploy to a third machine. So everything is now more separated and more scalable, basically. Yeah, and then the U components support and easier to extend. We've simplified a lot of the classes you use to resolve data and to build providers, for example. There's a ton of other stuff in here, but these are the main things.
Can I ask a question?
Yep, sure.
On the U components form, which is excellent. Is that part of your product, or have you made it part of U components? If that makes sense.
It's the resolvers for U components.
Yeah.
Well, currently they are in a separate DLL called Umbraco Courier.U components. So they're not included in U components by default, but it's included in Courier by default.
Okay.
So it will work out of the box, but you can remove the DLL if you don't need it.
I just thought, I don't know if you can do it, licensing, right? But it'd be great if you could put that as part of the contributed product. You know what I'm saying? In U components. But into
Yeah, so put the resolvers into U components.
U components guys can make changes, then we can potentially make changes to that to ensure it carries on being fully supported.
Yeah, totally agree.
It also gives a very good example to all the other package developers.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I don't think such things should be in the core of Courier.
No,
Yeah, especially if they make changes to different things, because it does a lot of reverse engineering on the different XML that's stored and looking up different items, so if a small change can break it, basically. So yeah, it's a very good point, and it should be on each individual project to have them included, instead of having everything in Courier, which doesn't make sense. Less centralization. Yeah. Anyways, we learned a ton about this, especially about respecting the ecosystem. Support widely used third-party projects, period. There's no question about that. 99% of all sites built by people in this room, at least, use U components or DAMP or any other bigger projects on our, and there should just be support for it. No question about it. So we want to do that. We've done it with U components now, and we'll continue doing it. To make sure that stuff works out of the box. As this one down here, you can do it with the API. It's a really shitty answer when people have an issue with your product. So we'll try to change that as well and be a bit more not so defensive about it, instead just be more proactive about it to solve the problem before it actually becomes one. Open up but formalize it. It's good to talk to people saying, hey, we want to do this provider and we do want to do this. Yeah, just go. But then it's gone. It doesn't happen. So we want to open up more, and we want to make more contributions, but we want to formalize it so people can actually work together on it, so we don't have one guy doing one thing and one guy doing another. And most of important is to shorten down the dev cycles. Now we've done this big jump to get over the initial architectural problems, and now we want to continue with shorter, more maintenance-like development cycles. So hopefully we'll have more smaller releases instead of these big periods with no releases at all. So now IS. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Just a suggestion, perhaps there should be a Courier compatible flag in the package repository.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe, I don't know.
Because that would give the responsibilities to the package developers.
Yeah, it would. I don't know if it's a good idea or not.
Yeah, okay.
It would give one of our own products.
Yeah,
too much
especially that's
attention.
my concern.
So I like the idea that our Umbraco is free from HQ
Interests and interference. We want to keep our a neutral, especially now that it's a marketplace. We want to keep it as neutral as possible. So yeah, our products shouldn't have any advantage over any other, basically. Because then sooner or later we'll have to have damp compatibility flags or something like that in there. And so it's just but I think IS has had plenty of time to actually work now, and my network connection is now not connected, so hopefully this works.
You can maybe allow, just on that one, you can maybe allow a way of saying our package is compatible with any of the other packages in the repository. So potentially, so if you've done integrations between packages, you sort of mean, so that there's kind of a link across between them all.
Oh, yeah, let's do that. I'll tell Peter to get started on it right away.
5-minute thing.
Yeah, 5-minute thing, it's true. Yeah.
I can hear him scream all the way.
No, not relations, no. Things can become very complicated very, very quickly, so we won't do that, I'm afraid. I think people can just write on their product description that this works with Courier. So, anyways, it was good with the questions because now IS has had 10 minutes to think about things, and I think it's working now. So if we right-click now, Courier, or maybe not. Maybe not. Let's see. Let's hope. Yeah. So what it's doing now is again it's packaging stuff up here. We see the green progress bar. Okay. So what we have now is we have a bit of difference in here. We have now a folder down here because of the resolver we added in here. We have this file here, and behind the scenes, inside of the data, it's still resolving the IDs, ensuring that everything works. Now the other side has to wake up. Ah, there we go. And if we open up the page in here, now it works. So now it's transferred it. And can you believe it? It only took like 25 minutes. Fucking fast. Oh, okay, sorry. The core of this is that you have to specify these 2 lines of code. You have to tell those dependencies that they're there, and you have to tell the resources that they are. The other thing, which I'm not demoing because we spent all this time on IS, is that you have the possibility of saving media data as XML directly on the page, which is a feature of DAMP. But Courier can't figure that out. It doesn't know what that XML does, what it contains. So in here, what Courier comes with is a helper under Umbraco Courier called helpers XML dependencies, where it has this little replace IDs method. Basically what it does is saying, this is the property data, this contains some XML, it contains some media item nodes, just select all of them, and then every time you find an attribute called ID, then do a replacement from, well, node ID to GUID, which is out here somewhere. And then return those replaced IDs. It only returns the replaced IDs it can find, so every time it finds an integer, it looks it up, see if it can actually find a GUID for it, then adds that GUID to the replaced ID collection. And then what we're doing down here is, for each of those replaced IDs, we add it as a dependency. So we have the ID here, and we're telling it to use the media item, provide a GUID, telling Courier that this is a media item, that's a dependency. So we're just going through XML, replacing stuff ID to GUID, and remember to adding the dependency to the media item. And then on the other end, during extraction, we're doing the same thing. Only that we're doing from GUID to node ID, reversing the process again. And then we have XML that works. We have a link to the media item, and we have a page that works, and a happy editor because it just added some stuff and it just works without worrying about it. So that's, well, you just have to wait 25 minutes for IIS to work, but other than that, it's perfect. So that's a way of solving an everyday problem, is adding support like this. And if we remove all the line breaks in these methods, it's 10 lines of code basically, and using this class that just automatically hooks into your process. Right? Any questions on that? Neil?
Sorry, if you use a macro inside a rich text editor to insert a media item, can it work its way through to work out that that media item is required when it does the deployment, or does it need some extra coding?
It works out of the box. It collects macros from the rich text editor, and it looks at the different macro parameters. Then it looks at the macro property type, weight parameter, and if that type is a media or content picker, then it'll figure it out.
Right.
So it should do that out of the box.
What happens when there's if there's kind of merge conflict between the source and the destination?
Well, you won't have a merge conflict because Courier doesn't merge.
I'm saying there shouldn't be, but if something's changed on both.
Yeah. Well, what this does is it's simply saying, I would like to duplicate the exact state of this to this other location over here. And Courier won't care what is already in the content. There's a couple of exceptions to that rule though. One of them is if you add a property to a document type on the destination server, it won't remove it. It'll keep it there. So we don't want to delete properties. And Courier doesn't delete anything, period. So, and it doesn't do merges and it doesn't do deletes, basically. It duplicates the state from one location to another. Yeah. Lars?
Is it, when you go through that rich text editor, is it possible to write like a custom kind of handler to pick up, like for example, we insert images.
Yeah.
When you insert an image, it actually has a data tag on it which relates it to a video. So the content editor can add an image into the content and then it gets converted into a video on page render. So would you be able to kind of pick that up?
Yeah, you would, but you basically go through the same process of, as you saw with this damp editor basically, saying that target all the property types with the rich text editor, look at the property data content, and then look at it with the regular expression, for example. And there's some helper methods in the core.helpers.dependencies, I think, where you can actually look up all image tags, for example, or specify a specific HTML element you'd like to find. You just look that up and you get all the attributes back. So you can look things up, but you still have to kind of reverse engineer it. Yeah.
Are there still two versions of the product, the Express and the full?
Yeah, there's still two versions. So the Express version is 99 and the full version is 449, I think. Yeah. And the big difference is that you couldn't use your own API and your own providers for it. But we've changed that. So from Express, you can use your own data resolvers, such as this one here, because that is one of the major concerns, is making it work with data that Courier doesn't understand. So Express will work with data resolvers as well. But it won't work with, for example, a subversion provider. It won't work with submitting a revision to a network share provider, for example. But it will work with these small utility classes, so you can resolve them, and that is what matters 99% of the times. Yeah.
And what's the upgrade path? You've already got licenses for two.
The upgrade path is basically we'll just deduct the price of Express from the full version price if you need to upgrade.
Can you upgrade Express to Express?
Yeah, you can upgrade Express to Express. Yeah.
It's from 2 to 2.5, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 2 to 2.5. Yeah, it's just there's to upgrade from 2 to 2.5. just to copy the files over. It's just a zip you need to unzip, basically. Then there's something about if you have custom configuration in courier.config, then you of course have to move that over manually, but that's the only thing. It doesn't have any database dependencies.
Free upgrade.
Yeah, and it's a free upgrade as well.
Does it retain a history of what you've changed so that you can undo the deployment of a bunch of content? Can you undo what you've done?
No, it doesn't contain a history in the sense that you have a revision and you can look at a revision and then undo it. You can't do that. What it does do is it after each revision it keeps a backup of files. It keeps that automatically. And you can still, from your source server, you can still roll back your content and then push it again. Or you do a database backup before big pushes to ensure that this happens.
Can I just also get my head around how, like in a real situation, let's say we've deployed a site to a production server where a client is editing content on the database, and we're doing development changes. So there's now a discrepancy between the content on our side, but we may have added additional properties to document type or something like that. Obviously, at that point, if we're couriering stuff out, we're couriering the revised document type rather than the content, and then everything works. That's right.
Yeah.
We don't touch the content because we overwrite that.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if everybody heard it, but the question was if you have development working on a dev site and you have content editors working on a live site. Content editors do changes and your developers do changes to the document type. If you deploy that document type, it won't touch the content. But it will update the document type, of course, to the state you want it to move.
And you were saying if you delete fields from the document type on your development server, it won't delete them.
No, it won't delete them.
Then if you add one, it will add it to the production server, but with no content in any of the nodes.
Yeah.
Just empty.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So thanks to my main man Heaven here. Time is almost up. So I just hurried through the last remaining slides. Right. I did that. So, Courier 2.5 release. Next week, unless I'm hit by a bus. Or we find something majorly wrong with it, but hopefully we won't. So next week, Courier 2.5. Another thing is, as a lot of been talking about, is how can we actually share all this code that people are doing. So we're starting Courier Contrib. Courier Contrib, codeplex.com. If you go to that site now, all the different bits and pieces of code that are shared from Courier over the last year basically is already there, shared, so you can pull it down, build your own stuff. Most of it is code samples. We'll aim to have more complete packages there as time goes by, but right now most of it is sample items. How you can build a console application, how you can do resolvers, the entire U components, DLL is up there as source, the entire data resolvers, DLL is up there as open source as well. So that is all available for you to look into and see how you can do these things yourself for very specific items. So hopefully that will be a good guidance and a piece of documentation for everybody. And of course we welcome contribution. I would love to hear how we could structure this and make it more formally. Arrangement between the different projects, how can we include it and how can we just add Courier support out of the box on, well, everything basically. So we want to hear how to improve that. Oh, Jesus, there's more. If you use Courier Contrib discount code, Courier 2.5, the full version for 99 euros, and Courier 2 Express for 19 euros. That's pretty cheap. So yeah, Courier Contrib, use that, Umbraco.com. And that is my final slide, I think. Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for all the questions. My time is up.